Imagine working your whole life for one chance, one interview that could change everything. Now picture losing it, not because you overslept, not because you weren't prepared, but because you stopped to help a stranger. That's exactly what happened to Derrick, a young black man who gave up his dream job interview to carry groceries for an old woman. What he didn't know was that small act of kindness would shake his entire future, because the woman's son was the CEO of the very company he thought he lost forever. Stay with me as I take you through this unbelievable story of sacrifice, destiny, and how kindness has a way of coming back stronger than you can imagine. And before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss more inspiring stories just like this. Derrick Johnson woke before the city. His room was small and smelled faintly of coffee and the lemon cleaner his mother used. He smoothed his only good shirt, checked the crease of his pants in a cracked mirror, and tied a tie that had been lent to him by Pastor Emmanuel the week before. Outside, the sky was a steel gray that promised nothing but work and a possible rain. Inside him pulsed a different weather, a nervous, hopeful storm that made his hands tremble. Punctuality wasn't a habit for his family, it was survival. Derrick had learned that early. Missed opportunities stacked into lessons. Today's interview at Grant & Company felt like the first rung on a ladder tall enough to pull his whole family up. He practiced answers on the walk to the bus, chewing on lines like talismans. Tell me about a time you solved a problem. Describe your strengths. He rehearsed not just for himself, but for his mother, who would stand at the window noticing anything different in his gait and count the minutes until he returned. He arrived early, the suit feeling like armor. A new slate of possibilities. He pictured the receptionist's smile, the glass atrium, a panel of polished men asking polished questions. He didn't know yet how one small choice would reroute everything. At the corner where the bus spilled its passengers, life moved in impatient abbreviations, coffee cups, earbuds, scrolling thumbs. Derrick nearly missed the woman because she moved at a different speed from the rest of the city. Her shopping bag snagged, her cane slipped, and she steadied herself against a weathered lamppost, a small comet of grocery plastic and dignity. There's always a moment, a single tilt of time where we choose who we are. He glanced at his watch. 8:35. He could jog the remaining 5 blocks, smile at the interviewers, and hope charm outweighed lateness. He could be practical. He could be selfish. Instead, something warm and uncalculated nudged him forward. "Ma'am, let me help you," he said, and his voice surprised him with how steady it sounded. Her hands were small and thin in his, the skin mapped by years of weather and work. "Bless you, child," she said. Her voice carried an accent of quiet authority, as if she had once run rooms that now had to be run by someone else's stronger knees. Derrick took the bags and the cane and matched his steps to hers. She lived 2 blocks away, a tidy building of flaking paint and wind chimes that sounded like distant bells. The walk that should have been 5 minutes took 20 because she told stories with the pauses. A grandson who worked in shipping, a husband who'd passed quietly, a favorite Sunday choir. Derrick listened, offering only small answers. Each sentence weighed his time against a deeper sense of rightness. By the time he left her apartment, after making sure she had tea on the stove and a caller saved in her phone, the world had moved, the sun had moved, the buses had moved, and the hands of his watch blinked 9:05. Grant & Company's lobby swallowed him in marble and cool air. He climbed the steps 2 at a time, tie askew, breath loud in his ears as if his heart were trying to be the loudest person in a room full of silence. The receptionist's desk was a slice of polished wood and indifferent efficiency. I'm here for the 9 o'clock interview. Derrick Johnson. He could feel the urgency in his own voice like a limb trying to pull free. She tapped keys, a small rain of logic. Mr. Johnson, it looks like the interviews began at 9. We can't. Her eyes softened for a beat after she said it, but she did not change her tone. Protocols were concrete here. Offices like this ran on them. Derrick asked for mercy in small, clumsy ways. He explained the old woman. He said, I had to help her. It sounded like an apology and a confession, and he felt embarrassed by how ordinary it all read on paper. She apologized but didn't relent. The doors to the conference room, closed like a fate, remained closed. Outside, the city carried on with its indifferent rhythm. Derrick sat on a bench and felt the world tilt. Months of study and sacrifice reduced to a single missed check-in on a clipboard. He wondered, not for the first time, why life attached such heavy consequences to tiny choices. He felt the sting of failure, but deeper than it was a quiet pride. For a moment, his chest filled with a stubborn warmth. He had chosen a thing that made sense to his conscience. He walked home the long way, through alleys where kids played double dutch and a bakery sent warm bread into the air. Passers-by offered pitying glances or none at all. Derrick tucked the disappointment into his jacket like a folded letter, hidden but present. The phone that rang 2 days later woke him at 6 in the morning. Faint light pooled around the edges of his curtains. He fumbled the handset with the same clumsy fingers that had once been steady soldering scraps at a tech job he'd done in high school. Is this Derrick Johnson? The voice asked, cool and professional. Yes, he said. Adrenaline spiked, suspicion and hope braided together. This is Miss Hargrove, Mr. Grant's secretary. Mr. Edward Grant would like to meet you tomorrow at 10. The words should have been ordinary, businesslike, but they landed in him like an unexpected sunrise. Derrick's questions poured out. Why? Did they want to apologize? Was it some clerical error? Miss Hargrove's answers were measured. My mother spoke highly of you. Mr. Grant asked that you come. Please be here at 10. The walk to the office the next day felt different. He replayed the woman's face, Margaret, and wondered if this could be connected. He tried to measure gratitude against suspicion. Men like Edward Grant did not randomly extend meetings to young men who had missed an interview. Men like Edward Grant made decisions with economy and intent. When he stepped into the CEO's office the following morning, he did not expect warmth. He expected the kind of sharp, efficient courtesy reserved for transactions. Instead, he found a man who watched him as if looking for a book he might recognize from its cover. Edward Grant's office was a study in restrained power, dark wood, an expansive view of the city, a single photograph of a man and a woman smiling on an old porch, a domestic counterpoint to the chrome outside. Edward himself was all edges and poise. Years in suits had taught him to inhabit authority without shouting it. He stood up when Derrick entered. Mr. Johnson, he said, and there was a softness to his voice that unmoored something in Derrick. Thank you for coming. Derrick told himself to be cautious, but the words spilled anyway, how he had missed the interview, how he'd helped an old woman. He felt suddenly like a child telling a story at church, embarrassed by its simplicity yet proud of the truth. Edward listened, and when the old man smiled, it was not the smile of a man who had merely been amused. Tell me about your upbringing, he asked, not as a polite starter but as an invitation. Derrick told him, a mother who worked nights, a church that felt like gravity, the habit of fixing things, radios, bicycles, small faults in the world, because it made him feel capable. Edward nodded. My mother called me the moment she got home. She told me about you, how you'd helped, how you'd stayed to make sure she was safe. She said, "He was kind, and he reminded me of how the world should be." The room shifted. The mood was no longer about a lapse, but about lineage. "We could hire for skills," Edward said quietly, "but character is the architecture of this company. We need people who think beyond their resume. We need people who know how to weigh a conscience against a clock." He offered Derrick not just a job, an entry-level position with mentorship, a seat in a rotational program that would teach him multiple facets of the company. "We'll train the skills. We want the person." Derrick felt his throat tighten. This offer was larger than the internship he'd rehearsed for. It was a quiet vote on a life he had yet to prove. He accepted on the spot, fumbling for words that sounded like gratitude and promise. The first day brought a flood of things Derrick had never known the names for: orientations, badges, acronyms that felt like a separate language. He met people whose suits matched their titles and janitors who waved like they owned parts of the building the executives never noticed. Derrick carried himself as if he had already arrived, but inside he was a student of everything. His mentor, a woman named Aisha, was exacting and kind in equal measure. She introduced him to spreadsheets, to boardroom etiquette, to the peculiar art of speaking rarely and meaningfully. She also introduced him to the idea that work could be used as leverage for good: employee volunteer programs, community partnerships, support for local schools. It was as if someone had handed him a toolbox and an invitation to build. The days were long and the learning was hard. Derrick stayed late, the hum of the offices a low companion. He learned the rhythms of a corporate ecosystem. There were meetings that ended nowhere and other meetings that shifted a company's direction. He took notes with pen and hunger, always mindful of the woman who had slowed him down and how that moment had unfolded into this. And though offers and compliments reached him, whispers in the hall, the occasional approbation from a passing executive, he never let them change the habits that had mattered most. He still greeted the cleaning staff by name. He treated the assistant in procurement like a confidant, because kindness was not an act for show but a currency he believed in. Months folded into seasons. Projects grew under his hands, and he found himself leading small teams, then medium teams, then being trusted with pitches that could change accounts. The company watched him the way a gardener watches a seedling, rarely and with purpose, until one day he received an invitation to present at a client meeting. He prepared for the pitch like he had never prepared for anything. More practice runs than sleep, mock presentations to coworkers, rewatching old tutorials. When the day came, his palms sweated not from fear but from the gravity of the chance. He delivered his proposal with the kind of clarity that only honesty brings. He was concise, direct, honest about the constraints, generous about the potential. The client's handshake at the end felt like a seal. Edward watched from the back, an unreadable expression. Later, Edward called him into his office. "Do you remember that morning?" he asked. Derrick remembered the smell of tea and the old woman's knobby hands. He remembered the watch showing 9:05. He remembered the receptionist's clipped apology. Edward smiled and said, "That was the moment we saw who you were. Everyone has the same opportunities to be kind. Not everyone chooses it. You did. That choice predicted everything." Promotion followed in time, not as an entitlement but as a consequence. Derrick began sponsoring small programs in the neighborhoods he'd come from. He arranged internships for college kids who could not afford to pay for entryways. He made sure that when someone else missed a bus or a break, there was empathy before procedure. Years later the company gala glittered with chandeliers and laughter shaped by success. Derrick walked in with a quiet confidence and a suit that fit like it had always been made for him. He had climbed, but he had not forgotten the ground. His mother sat in the audience that night, her hands folded as if holding a secret. She had traded night shifts for attendance at events she never would have imagined years before. Mrs. Margaret Grant approached him between applause and small talk, her eyes bright. "You remind me of my son," she said softly, and for a second Derrick saw in her face the same stubborn pride he had seen in his mother. He had started a scholarship fund in his mother's name, small at first, then feeding momentum, a ladder for other young people who needed someone to step back and let them pass by. He sat on panels in community centers, taught workshops at the very church where he had learned to tie a tie, and accepted an executive chair with the same humility he kept like a private virtue. On the stage, Edward hugged him with a brief, fatherly squeeze that carried more than congratulations. It carried recognition. Later, as the night wound down and the music slipped into a softer tempo, Derrick looked at the skyline and thought about minutes and choices. He thought about a cane and warm tea and an old woman who did not ask to be rescued but accepted the kindness. He thought about how the city moved and how one small delay had shifted an entire trajectory. Derrick had once feared that choosing compassion would cost him everything. The truth had arrived gentler than that. It had given him everything. And so, what Derrick once thought was the worst day of his life turned out to be the very beginning of his destiny. Missing that interview didn't close a door, it opened the right one. His simple choice to help an old woman revealed a truth too many people forget. Kindness is never wasted, it always finds its way back. Derrick's story reminds us that success isn't just about resumes and timing. It's about character, integrity, and the choices we make when no one is watching. Thank you for watching this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like this video.